Welcome back to the deep dive. Um, I'm so glad you're here with us today because we are settling in for something that feels, it's hard to categorize.
Yeah, it really is.
It feels a little bit like a ghost story, a little bit like an intense therapy session,
Yeah.
and maybe a touch of a metaphysical detective novel.
That's a surprisingly accurate way to put it. It's a mix that really shouldn't work on paper.
Yeah,
But when you dig into it, it explains so much about our daily lives and the chaos of just living with other beings.
exactly. Usually when we look at history or psychology, we're looking at the big stuff. Wars, elections, massive scientific breakthroughs. But today, we are zooming all the way in.
Microscope level.
Right, microscope level. We are transporting you, the listener, back to a very specific slice of history. We are going to a Wednesday evening, specifically June 29th, 1966. It's 9 p.m.
A quiet, sort of humid evening in Elmira, New York. Just a completely normal domestic scene.
Right, and we are looking at session 272 from the early sessions, book 6 of the Seth material. For those who might be new to this particular rabbit hole, or if you've just heard the name Seth floated around in spiritual circles, let's set the stage. We're talking about Jane Roberts, a writer and poet who is channeling this energy personality essence known as Seth.
And in the transcripts, Jane is referred to as Ruburt. And her husband, Rob, who is sitting there diligently writing all of this down in shorthand, is referred to as Joseph. Usually these sessions are full of high-concept philosophy, how the universe is constructed, the nature of time, how consciousness creates physical matter.
But this session is different. It's incredibly intimate. It starts with a domestic incident that sounds completely mundane on the surface, a cat scratching its owner. But it ends up explaining how our minds literally shape our reality.
It is the case of the killer cat.
Well, killer might be strong, but certainly a very angry cat. So, here is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore this bizarre cat attack to understand deep-seated psychological traumas, the physics of psychic energy, and how your bad mood might actually be turning your pets against you.
It is a chilling thought, isn't it, that we are leaking energy that affects everyone around us, even the animals in our homes.
Totally. So, let's set the scene properly. It's June 29th. Jane, or Ruburt, is actually having a really great day.
Yeah, the session notes say she received a proof of the dust jacket for her ESP book. She's feeling spry, she's happy, the vibe is really good.
Right. It sounds like a celebration is in order. Seth even opens the session by acknowledging this. He says, "I am glad to see that our friend Ruburt is again spry, good-natured, and himself again." He even compliments the book jacket, saying it will be a book to be proud of. It seems like it's going to be a victory lap.
But then, Seth, being Seth, pivots immediately. He doesn't stay on the surface level of congratulations. He says, "I would like to devote a little time this evening to a matter that concerns Ruburt rather deeply." And then he drops the bomb. He wants to talk about the attack made on Jane by their family cat.
And we need to clarify here, this wasn't just a playful nip. You know how sometimes you're playing with a cat, you get overstimulated, and it just bats at you.
Right, the classic overstimulation bite.
Yeah, this wasn't that. This was a significant event that terrified Jane.
And what is fascinating here is Seth's immediate diagnosis. A veterinarian might say the cat had a toothache.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a bug. Or maybe it's just a jerk. I mean, we've all met cats like that.
Sure, some cats just have a lot of attitude.
But Seth completely rejects the idea of random animal behavior here.
Yeah.
He dives straight into the mechanics of energy. He tells Rob and Jane that the cat didn't just go crazy, the cat was reacting to Jane.
This is what we call the sponge theory. Right.
Essentially, yes. This is the part that gave me goosebumps when I read it. Seth explains that domestic pets, especially house cats, are psychically very close to their owners. Think about it. They are closed in with us. They don't go to work. They don't have friends outside the house. They literally swim in our emotional waters.
So Seth says, and I'm quoting here, "The cat senses both of your moods immediately."
Exactly. And here is the physics of it. Seth states a fundamental law here. He says that all energy is creative and constructive. That's the baseline of the universe. Energy wants to flow, it wants to build, it wants to expand.
Okay, so if energy is positive, why the violence?
Because humans have this unique ability to take that creative energy and knot it up.
Knotted energy, that's a very visceral image.
It is. Seth says Jane had turned his creative energy inward. Maybe he was stressed about the book previously, maybe he was repressing something else entirely, but he misdirected that energy. And because he didn't focus it properly outward, it backed up.
That a clogged pipe.
Exactly like a clogged pipe that eventually bursts. Seth says when energy backs up, it explodes in what seems to be a destructive manner. Now, Jane didn't want to be destructive. He loves Rob. He loves the cat. He wouldn't hurt a fly consciously.
So he repressed it. He stuffed it down. I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Stuffed it down. But energy has to go somewhere. You cannot destroy energy. You can only transfer it. And because Jane wasn't expressing this aggression or frustration outwardly, the cat absorbed it.
That is wild. So the cat is just sitting there washing its face or whatever, and suddenly it gets hit with a psychic blast of Jane's repressed anger.
That is exactly what Seth is suggesting. He says the cat acted as a sponge. Because the cat was denied the usual constructive psychic atmosphere that Rob and Jane usually provide, it became nervous. It became bewildered. It felt this heavy, dark charge in the room and just didn't know what to do with it.
It's like the air pressure in the room suddenly changed, and the cat was the barometer.
Precisely. And then we get the feedback loop. The cat absorbed this negative, knotted energy from Jane. And what did it do? Seth says the cat, in self-defense, threw back the destructive energy it received.
In fury and full measure. That's the quote that really stuck with me.
In fury and full measure, the cat wasn't attacking Jane, the person. The cat was attacking the energy blob that Jane had projected onto it. It was the only way the animal knew how to react. It's pure physics. Action and reaction. Jane pushed psychically, so the cat pushed back physically.
This really makes you look at your pets differently. I mean, if my dog starts acting out or my cat starts hissing at nothing, do I need to check my own emotional baggage?
According to this material, yes, absolutely. Our domestic environments are ecosystems of psychic energy. If you are a conduit for stress, anger, or repression, your pets are the first line of defense. They soak it up until they literally can't anymore.
Okay, so we have the mechanics of the attack. The cat is essentially a psychic mirror. But Seth doesn't stop there. He uses this incident to do a deep psychological excavation of Jane. Because Jane's reaction to the attack wasn't just, ouch, get off me. It was pure terror.
It was absolute panic, and Seth latches onto that panic. He identifies a fear of violence as a keynote of Jane's personality.
Which is interesting because Jane is described in the notes as having a bit of a temper, right? He wasn't exactly a shrinking violet.
Well, Seth reveals that as a child, Jane had a strong temper. He threw tantrums. He was a normal, fiery kid. He had that aggressive spark that all children have. But then suddenly it stopped. The tantrums ceased in pure terror.
Why? What happened to turn off that natural aggression?
It's the relationship with the mother, and this is where the story gets truly chilling. Jane's mother was an invalid. She was immobile, bedridden, and suffering from severe rheumatoid arthritis.
Right. And usually you'd think that would make a child sympathetic. You know, mom is sick, I need to be quiet and helpful.
It did, but it also created a terrible psychological trap. Seth explains that in a normal childhood, a kid can act out. A child can slap a parent in a fit of rage. It's not good behavior, but the child knows subconsciously that the slap won't kill the parent. The parent is big, strong, and durable.
But Jane's mother wasn't durable at all.
No. Seth says in this case, the child did not dare slap the parent, for even the slightest move upon the mother's bed made the mother cry out in pain.
Oh, wow. So Jane equated his own aggression, even just a tiny childish outburst, with causing his mother agonizing pain.
It gets darker. It wasn't just pain, it was the threat of death. Seth reveals that the mother would act out her own death to punish the child.
Wait, she would pretend to die.
Yes. If Jane misbehaved, or if the mother was just in an unstable mood, she would pretend to have an attack or lay there as if she were dying and tell Jane that he was responsible.
That is literal psychological torture.
It is profound manipulation. Seth says the mother acting out her own death in order to punish the child. So Jane grew up believing that his anger was literally lethal. If he got mad, his mother might die. He wasn't just a bad kid if he acted out, he was a murderer.
So he became docile. He had to.
He had to. Seth says he held back all aggression in pure terror of the consequences. He equated his own natural life force because aggression is just a form of energy with death.
And this is why the cat attack triggered him so badly.
Exactly. Fast forward 30 years, Jane is an adult, but that inner child is still terrified of violence. When the cat attacked, it wasn't just a cat. It was a breach of the wall he had built to keep violence out.
This brings us to the symbolism. Seth talks about how the cat became a symbol for the mother. Can we unpack that? Because on the surface, a cat and an invalid mother don't look anything alike.
This is fascinating. So Jane's mother, the invalid, had an absolute terror of cats. She considered them the personification of evil.
A bit dramatic, but okay.
Well, she actually used cats as a symbol for her own mother-in-law, whom she deeply hated. So in the mother's mind, cats equal evil mother-in-law.
Okay, so the cat is already loaded with negative meaning in that household.
Jane knew this. Jane grew up hearing this. So, even though Jane likes animals now as an adult, under the sudden stress of the attack, that old programming kicked in. The cat, in its fury, became the personification of evil. It became the mother.
But the cat became the mother. I thought the mother hated cats.
It's a double switch. To Jane, the attack represented the violence his mother projected verbally but could never inflict physically. The cat became the avatar of the mother's rage. Seth points out something profound here. Jane fled from the cat. He ran away down the hall.
Right.
Seth says flight was the only solution as a child. You couldn't fight an invalid mother. You couldn't hit her back. You could only run or hide. So when the cat attacked, Jane reverted to the child who acts out flight because fight is impossible.
And Seth mentions the humiliation of it.
Yes. Seth says this was the first time, symbolically, that the parent could pursue physically.
Oof. That hits really hard. Because the mother was bedridden, she couldn't chase him. But the cat could.
Exactly. The cat was the mobile avatar of the mother's rage. So Jane wasn't running from a 10-pound tabby. He was running from the vengeful spirit of the mother he was terrified of killing, who had suddenly grown legs and was coming to get him.
When you lay it out like that, the panic makes total sense.
Right.
It wasn't cowardice at all. It was PTSD.
Precisely. It was a trauma response triggered by a very specific set of energetic circumstances.
But let's talk about for a second,
Yeah.
Joseph, because while Jane is freaking out and running down the hall, Rob is watching this happen. And he's not exactly sympathetic in the moment.
No. The notes imply Rob was pretty annoyed. He felt Jane was being a coward. He was thinking, just smack the cat. Defend yourself. Why are you letting this animal dominate you?
Which is a normal reaction for a bystander who doesn't understand the psychological weight of the moment. Why are you running from a cat?
Right. But Seth turns the psychoanalytic mirror onto Rob here, and it's brilliant. He says Rob is twice angry.
Twice angry.
First, he's angry at the immediate situation. But deeper down, Seth says Rob's anger is also a projection. Rob grew up in a home where violence was present but completely denied to the children.
Okay.
Seth mentions that Rob's father had a lot of aggression, but he lacked aggression in the business world. He let people walk all over him in business dealings.
Ah, I see where this is going. The lion at home, mouse at work dynamic.
Exactly. Rob resented that weakness in his father. He hated seeing his father be docile in the face of the world. So when Rob sees Jane, his partner, being docile and cowardly in front of a cat,
It triggers the daddy issues.
it triggers the exact anger he felt toward his father's lack of power. Seth says you are angry at your own lack of power as a child to retaliate against the atmosphere of violence.
So Rob isn't really mad at Jane. He's mad at his dad. And Jane isn't really running from the cat. He's running from his mom.
And the cat isn't really angry. It's just reflecting Jane's repressed energy back into the room.
It's a comedy of errors, but completely tragic.
It's a domestic tragedy of errors. Everyone is reacting to ghosts from the past, and the cat is just caught in the middle of the crossfire.
I love how Seth untangles this. He doesn't judge them. He just says, look at this mechanism.
He treats it like physics. You did X, so Y happened. It removes the shame. Once Jane understands why he was terrified, he doesn't have to be ashamed of the fear anymore.
And Seth makes a point that Jane needs to release this aggression. He says Jane's swearing allows him leeway, which I absolutely love. Seth is basically endorsing cursing as a therapeutic tool.
He is. He says when Jane swears, he is jubilant out of all proportion because he's finally letting something out. It's a necessary safety valve for all that built-up pressure.
So if you're listening to this and you have a potty mouth, just tell people you're practicing energetic release recommended by a disembodied entity.
I think that's a completely valid defense.
Okay, let's pivot a bit. We've come to the heavy psychological stuff, but this session also includes some of the classic parlor trick elements that make the Seth material so fun. The tests.
Yes, the Dr. In-Stream experiments. Experiment 76, to be exact.
Explain this to us. What were they doing here?
So regularly, Rob and Jane would try to verify Seth's clairvoyant abilities. They would have a sealed envelope or a target set up by this Dr. In-Stream, and Seth would have to describe what was associated with it without seeing it.
And in this session, Seth pauses the intense psychological deep dive to give his impressions of the target.
Right. He describes a mirror, or something that reflects, as a very shiny surface. He connects it with dark leather as a belt and a shiny buckle.
Very specific.
Extremely. And then he mentions a walnut box and a very cryptic math equation. 4 + 1 = 5.
4 + 1 = 5. That sounds like basic math.
It is, but Seth interprets it. He says it has to do with an unexpected guest. 4 were expected and 5 arrived. There was also an error involving a list of names.
I love these little details. It grounds the material. It's not just high-flown philosophy about the nature of reality. It's, hey, there's a belt buckle and an extra guest at dinner.
It reminds us that Seth claims to be able to see into physical reality, not just psychological reality. He's demonstrating range. It anchors the high-strung emotional analysis in concrete, verifiable facts.
And speaking of seeing into physical reality, Seth makes some bold predictions in this session about Jane's career.
He does. They were waiting on the ESP book, which is likely How to Develop Your ESP Power, Jane's book, right before the Seth books really took off and changed everything.
Seth seems pretty confident about it.
He's incredibly bullish. He predicts the book will change your circumstances for the better. He specifically mentions foreign sales, pocketbooks, which is what they called mass market paperbacks back then, and sales exceeding expectation.
And he throws out a number, 6.
Yes. He says, I have the impression of a 6. I do not know, however, whether it is 6 weeks you see or 6 months.
That's honest. Even an omniscient entity gets fuzzy on the timeline sometimes.
Well, time is fluid in the Seth worldview, so pinning down linear dates is notoriously hard for him. But he is certain about the outcome. He says it will mark the beginning of a major change in their living conditions.
And then there's the man with the hat.
Oh, this is my favorite specific detail. Seth says there is a man who wears a hat in his office who will be connected with one of these books. He is perhaps 46, but he is definitely between 46 and 56.
A man wearing a hat in his office. That's such a specific, almost noir detail.
It's very 1966, but it's a specific marker.
I wonder who that guy was. If you're a Seth scholar listening and you know who the man with the hat was, you have to let us know.
It shows that the universe is made of these specific granular details. It's not just energy waves. It's guys in hats and shiny belt buckles.
So we have the trauma, we have the cat, we have the predictions. But what is the solution? Seth doesn't just analyze them and leave. He offers a remedy. And it is surprisingly down to earth.
Literally down to earth.
Gardening.
Gardening. Seth tells Jane that working with the earth will almost always restore him.
Why? What is it about dirt?
It's grounding. Jane is a high-energy, flighty, highly intellectual personality. He lives in his head. He channels spirits. He needs to touch physical reality. The earth acts as a neutralizer for that knotted energy.
It discharges the static.
Exactly. Seth says it would help Rob, too, although he notes Rob has some unfortunate connections with gardening due to his father.
Of course. The dad ruins everything again.
And interestingly, Seth drops a reincarnation hint here. He mentions Rob's past life as a landowner and farmer in Denmark in the 1600s.
Just casually dropping that in. By the way, you were a Danish farmer?
But the point is, physical labor, connecting with nature, this is the prescription for psychic overload.
And he also gives Rob some advice on how to handle Jane's moods. Because Rob gets annoyed when Jane starts having emotional confessions.
Right. Jane starts crying or getting highly emotional, and Rob shuts down or gets irritated. Seth says these emotional confessions are not necessary. But he tells Rob that his annoyance just makes it worse.
Because it makes Jane feel rejected again, just like with his mother.
Exactly. Seth advises distraction. He says, distract Jane by asking about his writing. The subject chosen by you must be one in which he is immensely interested.
That is such a practical relationship hack. Oh, you're spiraling.
Yeah.
Tell me about that chapter you wrote today.
It redirects the energy. Instead of the energy imploding into sadness or trauma, it explodes outward into creative passion. It's energy alchemy. You aren't suppressing the feeling, you are transmuting it from sadness to creativity.
It's brilliant. So let's zoom out. What does this all mean for you, the listener, right now?
I think the core lesson is about the psychic ecosystem. We tend to think of our thoughts as entirely private. We think, I'm angry, but I'm not saying anything, so it doesn't matter.
So Seth is saying, no, you are broadcasting.
You are broadcasting constantly. And if you have a cat, a dog, or a sensitive partner, they are receiving that broadcast. The cat attack wasn't random violence. It was a physical manifestation of an invisible tension.
And it also highlights how much the past controls the present. Jane was reacting to a cat in 1966 using a script written in 1935.
And until we see that script, until we realize, oh, I'm not scared of the cat, I'm scared of my mother, we are doomed to repeat it. We will keep running from the cat.
So the takeaways for you today. 1, your pets are psychic sponges. Be nice to them by being nice to yourself.
2, check your childhood trauma. Are you reacting to the present moment, or are you reacting to a ghost?
And 3, if you're feeling overwhelmed, go touch some grass. Literally, get out there and garden.
And maybe wear a hat in your office. You never know who you're fulfilling a prophecy for.
Exactly.
I also think it's important to note the tone of the session as it closes. It ends on a really hopeful note. Seth says, the storm with Ruburt has passed, and you have both learned much because of it.
He even calls himself your dear old Uncle Seth.
Which is charming. It reinforces that he's on their team. He's not scolding them. He's guiding them through their own psychological maze.
Before we wrap up, we absolutely need to give credit where credit is due. The source material for today's deep dive is, of course, the Seth material, specifically the Early Sessions Book 6.
Published by the New Awareness Network. If this kind of psychological and metaphysical detective work fascinates you, you really owe it to yourself to read the raw material.
We are just scratching the surface here. You can find these books and more at the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcentral.com/early-sessions. Go check it out.
And just a reminder, this podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn.
So here's the final thought I want to leave you with. Next time you walk into your house and your dog barks at nothing, or your cat hisses at you for no reason, or your partner seems inexplicably grumpy,
Don't just react.
don't just react. Stop, take a breath, and ask yourself, what energy am I bringing into this room?
What am I projecting that they are trying to fight off?
It might just be that the call is coming from inside the house, or inside your head.
Indeed.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next session.